Hey there, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm a Fefe with Touch by Tarot and Beyond. And today I do a lot of spiritual stuff and a lot of political stuff. I'm a former journalist, so I kind of have an eye always on, sort of what's happening in the world. But also, I am a shamanic priestess, so, I walk with a foot in both worlds at all times. And my job, hopefully, is to kind of blend things together and bring it to you in ways that you enjoy and it makes sense. We break some things down. Right now, we're going to do a political reading. Going to keep it pretty short. Got a couple of topics I want to run by you guys. And as always, if you know me, you know I welcome your comments. I thrive on them. This is community. This is about sharing information and ideas and staying empowered, all of that good stuff. I do ask that you keep all comments respectful towards me and towards others, okay? So let's take a look at, today we're going to take a look at Samuel Alito's hot mic moment, right? That's all over the place right now. It broke yesterday. I'm taping this early Tuesday morning, the 11th. But yesterday, late yesterday, the 10th, we heard about this hot mic moment. We're going to get into that a little bit and see if he's digging himself into a bigger hole. And again, getting a sense from spirit that this is going to lead to some ethics reforms, some sort of serious and meaningful reforms in the Supreme Court, maybe down the line. But let's take a look at that. We'll go to spirit. Netanyahu officially invited to speak to Congress, I believe on now July 24th is the date. Interesting date. That will be subsequent to the sentencing for Donald Trump in the hush money trial, supposed to take place on July 11th. And then that's right before the GOP convention in Milwaukee, July 15th through the 18th. So him coming in on the 24th, be real interesting. I also want to go to Spirit and see if we may have a ceasefire in place by then. Will be really interesting. Because if not, we're already hearing about Dems perhaps boycotting. Want to take a look at that. And Spirit, I'm getting the hit that the protests, if he comes here, the protests. Oh, okay. So that's, and finally, third topic I want to take a look at. What is with this hashtag raw milk controversy? Apparently, this was something that for many years, I'm late to the party. I didn't know, you all. Maybe you did. But raw milk has been a thing, for quite some time now in certain sort of liberal, vegan sort of communities, those who are choosing less processing for their foods, right? But there are dangers in place, and that's why the FDA and Centers for Disease Control, CDC, have been involved and mandated pasteurization for milk because conditions of different cows and different farms could very well lead to some deaths, and there have been deaths. So, but now it's this culture war. The far right has come in and sort of as another anti-government boom, in terms of not feeling that they should have to comply with these governmental standards in dealing with pasteurization for milk. And sort of like we want to just be, from farm to consumer. We don't want you in our business. So it's flipped a little bit from, something that was seen as sort of a holistic natural foods kind of situation to now it's this becoming this political statement, this culture war thing. All right. So going to take a quick look at that and see if it's going anywhere. See if in fact there are going to be, if there's going to be sort of a pushback between the sale of milk that's widely distributed, that is pasteurized, that is quote unquote safer, or whether this is a movement that the far right is going to really get somewhere with and grow it in terms of not having these things in place, and if that in fact can represent a danger to people. Okay, all right, let's go. So, and for my new subscribers, I thank you so very much. For my members, please, there's a link below. I have memberships, and there's a different pricing tier. Select what you're comfortable with, and I appreciate all of it, all of you. But those for members, you do get separate videos. You get to ask me questions. Occasionally, I may do a live. I may do a Zoom, just one-on-one with my members. But otherwise, I'll take your questions. You also get discounted readings if you get a personal reading from me. All sorts of little perks and bennies on there. So take a look at that link down below, as well as my tarot guide. I sometimes forget, I'm not real good with sales, you all. That was not my thing. I'm a spiritualist, and I like to call it for what it is, but when it comes to sometimes marketing and speaking up for things that I offer, I sometimes forget about that. I do have a class, by the way, speaking of that. I have a class, but I'm going to do a separate video on that. Next Level Spirit Guides and Animal Totems on June 22nd, Saturday, with Susan Lynn. I will do a separate post on that too, but please mark your calendars. Would love to have you for that, and I'll give you the invite information for that. I'll go ahead and put a link to that here, and I'll put a link to it when I do the Animal Totems sort of intro video that I'll do probably later today, maybe even. So check back with me this evening on the 11th. All right, you all, let's go in. Sam Alito. I know he's sitting there still trying to figure out how he can put this one on Martha, right? On Martha Ann, because we know that with the upside down flag situation that was really, that came out in last couple of weeks, he wormed his way out of that, quote unquote, out of that by saying, listen, that was my wife. She has her right to self-expression, freedom of expression, her First Amendment rights. It was nothing that I could do about it. Okay. And, of course, none of us bought that. But it put him in that spotlight again. Him and Clarence Thomas, between those two, it never ends. But now at this, what was it? It was a Supreme Court Historical Society annual dinner. And this liberal filmmaker, her name is Lauren Windsor. Girl, we could be friends, right? Like, if what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing, we could be friends, Lauren. So Lauren went around and she starts having conversations with some of the justices, and she's recording them. They don't realize that they're being recorded. So she basically gets into this conversation with Sam Alito and says something to the effect of, there's so much going on in the country right now, and we need to get back to a place of godliness. Well, why did she say that? Sam Alito was like, girl, you are speaking my language. That's my interpretation. But he just leans into it. He goes off on this whole thing about, yeah, it would be nice. Again, all this is me paraphrasing. The quotes are out there. It's all over the internet. If you haven't seen it already, you can find it. But basically, encapsulating it, what he says to her essentially is, listen, peace would be good, but at the end of the day, you got to pick a team, and it ain't about compromising, right? There is no compromise. And he does say one side or the other will win. From a Supreme Court justice charged with a lifetime appointment of being able to, in an unbiased way, assess a situation and issue a legal precedent and render a decision in an unbiased way, strictly based on the law. But this guy is off on a religious hard right crusade. And that is what it's become for him. It is a crusade, similar to Clarence Thomas, but Alito's coming at it from another whole angle. Like he's even taking it up a notch. Clarence Thomas seems to be more about the wheel and deal. What can I get from it, to the tune of several $1 million in favors, if what we've learned is true. So, that's Clarence working the deal over on his end. But Alito is actually, in terms of this actual far right, I'm on board, pick a team. And clearly he has picked a team. So it'll be really interesting. We got that immunity decision coming down, that presidential Trump immunity decision coming down. End of this month is when we're expecting, before the Supreme Court closes out their session. So we're gonna really have our eyes on that, you all. But the same woman, Lauren Windsor, she also tried to have a conversation with Chief Justice Roberts, and he dodged the bullet. He dodged the question. He didn't entertain it. That would have been amazing to see what he would have said, but apparently he didn't bite the apple. But Sam Alito just spilled his guts. So I want to take a look at him and see if, number one, and of course, Rolling Stone, Lauren Windsor, I don't know if she works for Rolling Stone or if they were the first ones to publish this, but somehow there was a connection with her and Rolling Stone. But she said she knew she was going to take fire for recording Alito without his knowledge, right? But she said, listen, at the end of the day, with all of these ethics breaches, with all of this nonsense going on, clearly bias going on in the Supreme Court, we've got to get real information. There has to be some measure of accountability. And so she was like, yes, I did what I did, and I feel good about it, because at the end of that's the only way we're truly going to understand and know. We got to infiltrate. We got to get in there and get where the information is there to be got, in order to be able to finally get, at what point is it a bridge too far with these Supreme Court justices? And then, some form of ethics reform has to occur. So I want to see if, in fact, two things, if, in fact, there is going to be more of a push to hook a crook, as the old folks used to say, hook a crook, get more information that puts these Supreme Court justices, these far-right justices, in the public eye with irrefutable evidence of either wrongdoing, ethics breaches, frame of reference that clearly indicates their inability and unwillingness to be fair and impartial on the court. We have the Nine of Pentacles. I think there is building momentum for this, you all. And I do think we will see more. Of course, now everybody's going to be on red alert with conversations. It's like once you get in one way, there's going to be got to be careful. Like, how can you keep doing that? Lauren Windsor, now people are, are you recording me, sort of thing? Who knows? But I do think there's going to be more, there's a build up of determination around accountability in the Supreme Court. I do also spirit ethics reform. Ethics reform. King of Wands. This King of Wands, I don't feel like that. Well, maybe that is Robert's. And Death. Oh, okay, here we go. We will have reform. I don't know Robert's age or state of health. Maybe I'll look at that at some point, but I feel like this is when there's a changeover. This is when there's going to be a natural, some of these justices, Clarence Thomas, Alito, and others, they are getting up there. We know that Clarence Thomas has had some health issues, and I don't have time. I'm not going to look at that today, but I will look at his health. But this Death coming with the King of Wands feels like there's someone who on the court is going to either, if there's not an actual death, there could be a health issue where they have to step back from it. And whenever that next, excuse me, got a little hair. Whenever the next opening is when this issue of ethics reform is really going to rear its head. And we're going to see some changes and questions around who is being put on the court. Yes, Ten of Cups. There's also, and there will be, so it's building momentum toward it. And there will be a change, but that change, it's almost like there's something that has to occur to precipitate that change. So again, it's either someone who gets ill or someone who does transition and moves on and dies. But the next time that is, so it's not going to be voluntary. We knew that though. It's not going to be voluntary. It's not going to be anything, where once again, because of another instance of a Supreme Court justice coming out and clearly saying, you know who I ride for, you know what I'm out here trying to do, changing these laws. Contraception is next on their list, you all, right? We've got the whole thing around, gender care, that battle is still being, or gender identity, gender affirming care, that battle is still being fought. We have, the Dobbs decision. We have reproductive rights now clearly a leading issue going into the election. So there's a lot, but it is not enough for the Supreme Court in and of itself and on its own recognizance to go ahead and address what clearly have been ethics breaches. They're not going to do it, but the next time there is a clear shift in the court, or time for a shift in the court, that's when it's going to rear its head. All right, you all. Moving on to Netanyahu. Gonna come over here and talk to Congress. Benny Gantz just said, I'm out, right? And he was the more, if I got my facts straight, he was the more centrist, more pragmatic sort of thing, in the face of this increasingly far right leaning portion of Netanyahu and his people. So now he's going to come here, Mike John, and this is of course being done as a gotcha to Dems, and they're hoping that the hard right, they're hoping that this will also make Trump look good in terms of saying, listen, we are the ones who are holding up America's obligations to Israel as its staunchest ally. Never mind on the flip side of that, and again, this gets so much hypocrisy because on the other hand, that's something that Joe Biden has been taking a lot of flack for, is the fact that he has remained staunchly supportive of Israel, even as he's trying to walk that fine line and understand that the Palestinian issue is real and the deaths are mounting, and this is something that needs to be addressed. A ceasefire needs to happen. I want to ask first is, will there be a ceasefire by the time Netanyahu comes here on July 24th? And secondly, I want to get a sense from Spirit if not, the extent to which there will be a Democratic boycott in Congress of his speech, of Netanyahu's scheduled speech, and if there will be a public protest movement, because that's what I'm feeling is coming. All right, first, ceasefire. Spirit, will there be a ceasefire, a deal struck between Hamas and Israel by July 24th? Nine of Pentacles is back. The moon, I'll show them to you. And the hermit. Talks. Definitely still talks. But that moon and that hermit, it's like the fine print, and this relates somehow to this hermit is making me feel this is definitely related to the hostages, the remaining hostages. We know that there was that rescue of the 4 hostages, and I'm feeling like there may be another rescue even, or certainly now that they've had that one, they are doing everything possible to try and figure out where the other these other buildings where hostages were separated and stashed, right? So we know that that's happening as well. But there's a portion of this that the terms of this ceasefire, Hamas feels like the hostages are the only thing really that they have to negotiate. And it's almost as if they are afraid with that moon. It feels like they are afraid. The 9 of Cups, what is it they want, Spirit? The 9 of Cups, that's the win-win. And the Knight of Swords. So that's this conversation that they're having ultimately about what they want. And the 3 of Wands. Okay, so it's more than just the release of hostages that's going to make these talks last longer and go on more. It is assurances that I don't think they're willing to reach a deal. Hamas is not willing to reach a deal where they will release all of the hostages. They still want a certain number, or there's some sort of transition phase between when those hostages will be released, because again, that's their protection. That's what they feel they have. And also they want something, they want something that indicates a plan for rebuilding. So it's not just ceasefire, but it's ceasefire and something else. That's part of what's making this, every attempt to reach a ceasefire go on and on. The High Priestess, exactly. There are elements of this that first and foremost, we're not being told. The public's not being told. There are aspects of the talks. We know that Blinken has been going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We know that Qatar and Egypt are a part of this mix as well. So there are conversations, there are some parts, some aspects of what's being put on the table that is not being made public, you all. And I think it's not being made public because there are aspects of it that might cause a bit of an uproar. Either side, Palestinian and or Israeli sides, and the international community might have some objections to some of the terms that might be on the table and that might in fact ultimately be agreed to in an effort to get a ceasefire strength. It's and that is crucial. We already know Netanyahu, and the whole stance of, I don't care what he said. At one time, he would fight down to his claws, and kicking and scratching, no matter what. But from Hamas's end of things as well, there is a need to feel that this ceasefire, keeping in mind that they kicked this whole thing off, right? October 7th, this was on them. But they want to be able to exit from this portraying a certain position of strength. So it's not just we are willing to agree to a ceasefire so that you will stop killing Palestinian and starving Palestinian people and completely destroying, any and everything that we have. It's more than that, because that's more of a capitulation in their mind, in their way of being. It's we will do it, but you got to give us something. There has to be some terms built into this where we get something from this. Judgment. Talk about a confirmation, right? They want something. And it either is something around land, something around money commitment to regrow, or rebuild, or something structural, that kind of thing. But that's the holdup. So back to our question at hand. Is this all going to be in place by July 24th? Great big question mark. I'm not so certain about that. But there will be, for sure, there will be more momentum and the terms being defined closer and closer and closer to what is ultimately acceptable. All right? And finally, last thing, you all, this raw milk situation. Hashtag raw milk. I understand now you're going, TikTok, X, other media platforms, and you do a hashtag raw milk. There's a whole thing. What's interesting again is that apparently the far right is now co-opting what heretofore had been pretty much sort of a hippie kind of thing. For groups of people who were, and I don't know if they still do it, but from what I read, Whole Foods, even at one time, was selling raw milk based on demand for it. So again, if that is being done in that context, I guess the way that the milk is being sourced, how the cows are being raised, what the cows are being fed, right? All of those things come into play as a measure to mitigate potential damages from drinking raw milk, which again can contain bacteria, E. coli, listeria. I read an article that said, let me see if I can find it. It said that, I don't think this was recent, but there were 8,000 infants in New York City alone who died in the span of 1 year from this raw milk craze that was taking place because of, again, lack of oversight, lack of regulation, etc. So I'm not, for my naturalists out there, I'm not in any way trying to down this. I would imagine that if people are really into raw milk, then they are, they're doing their homework and they're making sure that it's adequately sourced. But I'm also understanding that for this far right movement now that's jumped on and wants to co-opt this because it's more of an anti-government, anti-regulatory, anti-FDA and CDC sort of movement, that they are willing to put raw milk, direct from farmer to consumer, And remembering too that a lot of people in the MAGA movement, these are your farmers. These are people in more rural areas who are becoming increasingly anti-government, right? They're buying into this thing lock, stock, and barrel. And so even to the extent that that can endanger people or take away certain protections based on, these regulations that are designed to make sure that, pasteurization, that this bacteria is eliminated before consumption. I just want to see, is this something that is growing in momentum, and does this have legs to it? Is this going to be something where we will see the American public, the consumer, being put in increasing danger uh, from this? The hermit, again, that's a health issue. It's a health hazard, 100%. And again, not knocking those who have chosen that option because of, various people feel very strongly about nutrition and being in charge of their body. Six of Wands, that's a victory. That's a push for it. But push for more. Six of Wands with this hermit feels more like a push for better, not regulation necessarily, but there must be mechanisms put in place to reassure consumers that if in fact they want raw milk, then they must be assured of how these cows are being raised, what they are eating, their environment, how they're being kept, whether they are being exposed to things like bird flu, etc., right? How many times have we heard recalls, even on beef? Or other products because of what animals on farms are being exposed to. So yes, this is not going away. Six of Cups. This is again this MAGA movement's dream of going back to the America of old, of women in the kitchen, men going out hunting, and bringing home a rabbit to put on the table, right? It's really is. There's a mindset here, you all. Talk about the need for some Series D programming in the coming next few years, but we'll get there. We'll get there. All right. Five of Pentacles. It's not going to seriously impact the industry. Ten of Cups. That's families being safe, people wanting their families to ultimately be safe no matter what. And the Five of Wands, it's not going anywhere. This is basically this raw milk, hashtag raw milk movement, you all, is basically something that is being used as another symbol. It is symbolic in terms of the culture wars that are happening right now, but in terms of an actual growth as a product, as a consumer product for people, it's not gonna be demonstrable. I think for the most part, the American public, the American consumer is still going to want. They'd rather, especially in a post-COVID era, the temperance. Yes, thank you, Spirit. I can close out on that. Healing, moderation, pasteurization, right? In ways that feel safe and that make sense, and that people can believe that they're getting a safe and solid product. So no, this hashtag raw milk is definitely something that is being co-opted in the interim for the hard right to once again thumb their noses at the FDA, the CDC, government regulators in general, but in terms of it growing as a popular product that then can pose a potential risk to consumers. Don't see it happening. All right, you all? All right, have a good one. I will talk to you really soon. Check out the description below for joining the channel and for the event that I have coming up with Susan Lynn. Again, I'm going to do a video later today, probably on just a little overview of animal totems to give you a little bit of a flavor of where I'm going to be going with that. And I'll talk to you real soon. Take good care of yourself.